This is a program which is going to be talking on COVID before and after. And I have an excellent panel with me who is going to be debating upon the positivity and the negativity of COVID. There has been so much spoken about, so much written about, so much of confusion, and so much that has really resulted in reams of paper, but we still have to have the specialists here, which we are very that the Economic Times has actually brought us all together to be able to debate on such a subject. And the real pearls of the fertility have come together. And I would like to put across the names of people who are here with me to debate on the subject of COVID and fertility. Let's just get on to the first speaker, fertility landscape in India till now, and how fertility treatment happened till COVID started. Dr. Firoza.
Thank you, Kamini. It's a very valid question and very important in this COVID-19 times. Actually, the fertility scenario in India was and is going to be very robust. As you will see, there are more than 2,000 centers in India, and every town and city will boast of at least 2 or 3 centers. In fact, a time has come or had come when patients didn't have to travel to metropolis cities in order to do IVF. We also saw medical tourism in IVF, which was a very healthy sign and would boost our economy. Also, the doctors of today are the young generation. They're very well trained. They have taken courses abroad, and there are 3 aspects which I want to touch upon. One is the institutionalization of IVF, one is the corporatization of IVF, and then the standalone clinics. These are 3 models which are doing extremely well in India. There is one important facet, and that is the doctor-patient relationship. IVF was very specific to the patient and doctor. A patient would say, "Doctor, you are like God. I want you present for my pickup. I want you present for my transfer." So that was a very soft side of IVF. Perhaps we will later on elucidate how that may change in the COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 times. Thank you, Kamini, for your question.
Thank you, Firoza. But all was all hunky-dory till, of course, COVID entered in. COVID, Corona. Corona, of course, I thought was a crown till, of course, COVID made its presence. And what happened? A whole problem, commotion, confusion. And here in walks our debonair Rishikesh Pai to tell me what exactly really happened in the confusion time of COVID. Rishikesh.
So I remember that we had our annual conference of the Indian Society for Assisted Reproduction in March, and during right that moment, the COVID started breaking into India, and by the end of March, it had really started exploding all over the world, and we knew that there is some major disaster that is coming into our country, and we started reacting to it. Medical organizations within the country, the IMA, the Federation of Gynec Societies of India came out with a GCPR, which Government of India has even accepted. And then our 2 main fertility organizations came in, the Indian Society for Assisted Reproduction and the Indian Fertility Society. So there was a major chaos. We didn't know what was happening, whether this affects the patient or not, whether there's going to be a problem with the child. And slowly the paper started coming out of China and from United States, because by mid-April and end of April, there were a lot of, so this was the advantage, because the medical community started publishing. We were coming to terms with the disease. This was a totally new disease. And then what was felt that as the consumption of emergency services were tremendous, there was a lot of load. So all the organizations decided that the elective work like IVF and other elective work, which non-emergency work, should be stopped till the time we came to an understanding as to exactly what was happening. what was the risk to the patient, risk to the unborn child. All that had to be, and we wanted to not burden the medical community and the government, because all beds had to be given to the COVID patients. And as of now, I was just looking, 1.16 million people are there today that are infected. Fortunately, 700,000 have recovered. There are 28,000 deaths, but there is a slow flattening of the curve. The recovery, the testing has mounted, and now maybe we may come out of this confusion and maybe we may restart the practice again. So this was the whole scenario from the beginning of, from the middle of March till now, Dr. Kamini.
How do you think, Abba, that the health has been affected, and in what way health and fertility has been affected, Abba, in this COVID era?
Well, Kamini, thank you first for having me on this panel. And I think when World Health Organization announced to the world that this COVID-19 outbreak is a pandemic, the world shook. That was 11th of March. And soon after that, we all started realizing the importance of what was happening. There are more than 7 million people who are affected, or I would say 14.5 million people have been affected. There are 6-7 lakh deaths all over the country, all over the world. And hence, this pandemic is there, spreading so fast, and it is there to stay for some time. And so health was very adversely affected of all women, men, children. Well, as far as fertility goes, talking about effect on fertility, the available data on the exact effects of COVID-19 are yet very scarce. Very few journals or articles have emerged telling us the real effect on fertility. The first thing, according to WHO, was pregnant women and non-pregnant are at equal risk. And they said pregnancy is not affected worse than what a non-pregnant similar female is affected with. But then when the pandemic broke, it was the fear of the unknown. We all just closed shop within days. We had to stop cycles. We had to look into our nitrogen tanks. We had to look into our media, and we had to stop everything. What did fertility be affected? We know very, very little about this virus. There are papers coming out that does it affect spermatogenesis? I really don't know. A paper says that yes, it can affect spermatogenesis. There are S2 cells over there, and it can sort of almost kill the Leydig cells, this virus. But then these people have been tested post-infection, have found to have absolutely normal semen values. So we need not get very afraid. Yes, we have to go on researching and seeing which are the ones which are affected. Similarly, in women also, there were papers which said that the endometrial cells are being affected. Then some papers came out to say that oocyte quality and its numbers can be negatively affected. But then that yet no paper is there on fallopian tube saying that anything on the fallopian tube is also being affected. But then none of the papers later on said or brought forward the fact that anything is adversely affected to a state where a woman cannot get pregnant. For a brighter note, I would say a lot of women became pregnant during this pandemic. Now, whether it was the lockdown, whether it was the easing of the stressful life which people had, or it was the family got closer together. But from every center, I at least heard this, including mine, patients who were waiting for IUI and IVF got pregnant naturally. So this is a brighter note to the whole thing, after saying that, yes, the sperm could be affected, the oocyte could be affected, even maybe the fetus might show, and there has been a case of vertical.
It's very difficult to say because we've not gone that far yet. But nevertheless, we can still hope. Unless we have a good database, we can't still talk about that. While normal couples are all getting pregnant, we can't still say beyond that. Yes. Other than, of course, I would ask Manish, treatments will change in the post-COVID area.
Safety of our patients has always been an area of prime concern for every healthcare provider. Now, when any pandemic sets in, it adds certain additional risk factors when we are treating our patients. And to ensure that safety becomes that much more important. keeping this in mind, there are certain areas in fertility treatment which will need special attention. First, we know that patients having comorbidities are at a higher risk if they contact the COVID disease. So, whenever we are treating patients for their fertility treatment, if they have additional complications like diabetes or hypertension, we need to be extra careful. In all fertility treatments, there is a higher risk of multiple pregnancies. Multiple pregnancies themselves pose the woman at a higher risk. So we need to take utmost care that we try to reduce or minimize the risk of multiple pregnancies. But one big area which is going to change drastically is the area of third party reproduction. This is an area where we use egg donors and we use surrogates. So apart from the couple, it is one more person who also gets exposed to this risk. This is something which will need serious thought as to how do we minimize the risk to this third party which is helping a couple to conceive. So to me, the biggest area of change will come in taking additional safety measures, which in the long run will help the fertile patients because you are focusing that much more on their safety.
Thanks, Manish. I think what we need to go is towards digitization because we can't do without digitization and artificial intelligence. And I'd last like to ask Rishikesh Pai, what does he think of digitization in the COVID area? Because we've been seeing a lot of webinars and seminars all going on the digital platform and with a widespread knowledge of COVID all across. And therefore, we have none other than Rishikesh Pai to tell us how he finds digitization in the COVID area.
So, I feel that the telemedicine and the digital platform has been a boon to all of us, all over the country, all over the world. I think internet has really been the savior for the whole world in this COVID times. We can talk with each other. Just now we are on the digital platform, all of us, and a lot of communication occurred through that. And this has actually percolated into our practice as well. So in the infertility practice, you can do almost everything now because, it's very dangerous for the patient also to come too many times often to the hospital. So by minimizing the visits to the hospital, by talking on the phone, by having video consultation, you can have so many platforms are there, which we have got like WhatsApp and so many different video platforms are there. You can communicate. You can even now many of us are sending the laboratory diagnostics. They go home and collect the blood and all that. So most of the things you can minimize the patient interaction, patients coming into the actual big hospital areas because there are a lot of other patients, infected patients that are there. When you're traveling, you can catch the disease. So you need to have some kind of social distancing, and digitalization helps a lot. And as I told you that infertility is an elective kind of treatment. So you don't have to be rushing. So you communicate through the digital platform. And not only that, it has helped us in trying to only bring the patient for the final treatment for all our 4 IVF centers which we have started. We have done nearly 50 cycles now after the lockdown, and everything has been minimized. We have hardly seen the patient. Everything is through digital communication, and this has become like a digital. We are leaping into the digital age. So as I was telling you, Dr. Kamini, that in the future we have got so much used to digitization. We are not going to leave this. The whole world has changed for permanently changed, has undergone a permanent change, and we are going to go digital in the future as well. I'm really comfortable with this digitalization that is there.
Now we cannot lose out on the farmer who's also been at the cutting edge of trying to find something with the COVID. And now we know that farmer has been doing a lot. So we'd like to find out, how is the farmer really helping us during the COVID times, the challenging times, and how are they going to be helping the public, the medical people at large? So Pratik, can you please elaborate on this?
So thank you, Dr. Kamini, for the question. This challenging time is for everyone, and pharma does not leave behind. We are also part of the healthcare chain, and as a company, different companies directly related to the healthcare. It's our responsibility as well So what has been going on within the pharma is a lot of new drugs. Now, up till now, nobody actually knew about how to treat coronavirus or how to treat the COVID-19. So at Bharat Serum, what we started doing is we looked at our own product portfolio and looked at whether can we look at some product which can help in treating the coronavirus. So now in that we had two main products. One is ulinastatin, which was already approved. So it's a known drug, already approved in the country with by the regulators, already been used for sepsis and acute pancreatitis. But we also looked at whether we can repurpose this drug to take care of the ARDS due to coronavirus. So this is something which we looked at the basic research and started looking at how do we take it forward. So then we went to the regulator. We got an approval for a clinical trial. So the clinical trial is already is ongoing in the country in many major hospitals here in the country, where we are trying to evaluate whether this drug can actually help. So we don't know for sure whether it would help or not, but we are trying to do that evaluation in terms of whether it can be useful. Of course, for that also we received the regulatory approval, because as a company we go by what the regulation says. So that is one very important aspect of repurposing, because especially going and finding out new drug altogether takes a very long time. So as you all know, that we don't have that much of time. Also, looking at, you would have heard a lot about the plasma therapy, which is ongoing. So, as a company which is quite big in immunoglobulins, we looked at, if we can have immunoglobulins against the COVID antigen. So that is something which we are already doing in terms of, trying to basically look at, can we manufacture the immunoglobulins against the coronavirus antigen. So there is a platform which we use, which is like plasma fractionation platform technology. Of course, very early stages. It is not even in clinical. It is in a preclinical stages of development. But if successful, it would actually help in bridging the scarcity caused by the human plasma. So everybody talks about human plasma therapy, but everybody knows that how scar it is. It's not routinely available. So that is something which we are trying to do. And similarly, many other companies, they have repositioned their drug. So, and everybody started evaluating, whether we can do something which will be directly useful for the treatment. So that is one which is directly bang on to the coronavirus. Of course, there are many other things which we can do is in terms of, how do we make patients aware of the certain aspects. So there are many things which pharma is already doing in terms of supporting, how patients get their medicine
Yeah.
by no
Very-
contact delivery and all those things. So patient awareness programs, especially considering, see, this is one of the awareness program only which pharma is doing, BHV, Bharat Serum is doing, is to promote that, everything is not that bad. We are in a phase where we have to start living with this condition. We don't know for sure when it would go away. So how do we educate the patient in terms of that everything is not bad? We can still go ahead and start our routine work. So that those are the few things which I felt pharma can support and which are already doing.
Yeah, Pratik, we've got a whole lot of vaccines coming along, and I think that is something that we should be talking about, and very close on the heels of a whole lot of new drugs. We've got these vaccines coming along, and who knows, by the end of this year, as our Prime Minister has said, that we may have a vaccine coming in, a whole lot of herd immunity coming in, a lot of other things that are happening that has really got the entire country on its edge. at the end of it, I must say, I must add this because I think we are really short of time, but I must make some bullet points over here. First and foremost, I must thank all my panelists for having done a wonderful job, have given bullet points about COVID-19, but I must say that it has decreased the carbon footprint. It has also given positivity in terms of hygiene. It has also given efficiency in terms of digitization. So COVID is all not bad. COVID is positivity. And it has actually changed the way we actually look at our own hygiene. When was the last time you actually washed your hands 10 times a day pre-COVID? Now you washed your hands more than 10 times. I mean, when was the time when we really did those sort of things? These are some of the things that we should thank COVID for. I hope that this remains with us and we continue using that hygiene forward. And of course, we will never know how much COVID is going to affect the future generations. Still, we have a very good database, and this database has to be collected by all organizations, whether it is different sort of departments. And I think especially in our area, particularly at the level of the egg, the sperm, the embryo, as well as in terms of the pregnancy, then following that, the development of the child, etc. But the generations, etc., we will only know their IQ. In fact, they may be even better than what we are today, because maybe it has changed some of the genes that is there right now. So hopefully we will not have such a bad time like we've had now. Of course, our entire level of our GDP and everything has fallen, but it has certainly brought up our hygiene to an extent that is just not possible. So I would say that while COVID has brought down our GDP, it has brought up our hygiene, it has brought up digitization, it has stopped so many conferences, but it has brought up efficiency and effectiveness in dissemination of a whole lot of information. Imagine so much of information in half an hour of COVID. I would never have thought of it in the pre-COVID era. So I think I thank Bharat Serums, I thank the Economic Times for having given us this opportunity, and all of you for having given me the opportunity to moderate this panel. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.